Hi, welcome to Boise State in the Community. I'm your host, Lupe Fonseca, and today I have a very important guest, Brittany Brand. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So I would like to start off with you telling me a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'm a geologist. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Geosciences, and my specialty is volcanology, which means that for a living I study volcanoes.
Oh, cool. Are you from here?
I'm actually from Ohio, where there are no volcanoes, but I grew up loving geology, and I had a fossil collection from a very young age. And I think I fell in love with volcanoes when I was about 12 years old, and I went to visit an aunt in Seattle and saw Mount Rainier for the first time. And basically since then, it's all been volcanoes for me.
Can you tell me a little bit about like your education background?
Yeah, sure. So I went to undergraduate at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And after that, I came to Boise State University for my master's. Fell in love with Boise, fell in love with the Department of Geosciences here, and always wanted to come back. But I left to get my PhD at Arizona State University, finished that in 2008, and then took a research position and part-time lecture at the University of Washington. I was there for about 4 years before a position opened at Boise State, and I came back.
Why Boise State? Why Boise?
Why Boise? Well, I love Boise because it's just a really nice community. It's a city, but it's a small city. It has everything you would want in a city, but maybe only one of them. It's great for outdoors, which of course I'm a geologist, so I love to be outside. And it's really well situated between volcanoes. So we've got volcanoes right here around Boise. We've got Yellowstone, we've got the Cascades, all within driving distance. And the Department of Geosciences at Boise State in particular is one of the most collegial, warm environments I've ever worked in.
Okay.
It's common in universities to have competitiveness and departments and people that don't get along very well. We all try to, but there always tends to be some of that. And we really just don't have much of that in the Department of Geosciences. Everybody is very friendly, very collegial. If you publish a paper, they congratulate you. If your student graduates, everybody gets together and goes to the defense. And so it's just a really great place, a very nurturing place to work.
Nice. So you said you chose geoscience because of volcanoes. What about volcanoes?
That's a good question. So my particular research focuses on explosive eruption dynamics and the hazards associated with volcanoes. Mm-hmm. And my research really, it sort of took a turn at some point where part of my research is hardcore geology. My students and I, we go out to the volcanoes, we camp out there for weeks at a time, hiking, collecting rocks, carrying things out and back, and collecting all of our data. And that's the primary focus of my research. But I'm also interested in natural hazards, both volcanic and other types of natural hazards like earthquakes, severe weather, things like that. And so for volcanology, we study the scientific side of how volcanoes erupt, how they behave, and how to predict the hazards associated with them. Mm-hmm. And then for the hazard side of research, I focus actually more on how to communicate hazards and risks to the public, mm-hmm. and how to motivate preparedness actions so that if something does happen, people are ready. Okay.
And why is this so important to you? Your fascination towards not only volcanoes, but hazards as well?
That's a good question. So when I was teaching at the University of Washington, I taught a class called Living with Volcanoes. And the first semester I taught it, the Living with Volcanoes part was one class on Greek and Roman mythology. And so the comments from the students were, hey, yeah, we love learning about volcanoes, but we never really learned about living with them. And so based on that, I started doing research and realized there hasn't been a whole lot of research on how people feel about living with volcanoes.
Right.
How they personalize the risk, why they can put themselves at risk, what are the benefits that outweigh the risks. And so as a group with the students, we decided to do a research project with 200 students, by the way. This was a big class at UW.
Wow.
And we put together a questionnaire and we sent it out to their students' friends to try to gauge people's knowledge about local natural hazards, volcanic and other natural hazards, their their perception of risk from those hazards and their level of preparedness. And we designed the questionnaire to be educational and provide information at the end. And what was amazing to me is that these 200 students really got into it. They found it really interesting. They couldn't believe people didn't know about hazards, even though they themselves didn't really know about them either before the class. And they really took ownership in the project. They were excited that they were actually making a difference by sending out the questionnaire. And some of them started making Facebook pages and talking to their friends and family. And I realized that I'm passionate about this. I want to make a difference, but there's only one of me, and that's limiting. But when we work with our students and get our students engaged and interacting with the public, it's a lot of you guys, so students can make a big difference.
Wow, that's great. What courses do you teach here at Boise State?
So the courses I teach at Boise State are geoscience communication, well, it's earth science, communication in the earth sciences. Okay. And it's a 200 level class for geoscience majors. We focus on technical writing, communication with presenting posters and oral presentations, things like that. I also teach volcanology and an advanced physical volcanology. And most recently, I started teaching a natural hazards, vulnerability, and risk course, which is a service learning course.
Okay, yeah, so tell me a little bit more about that, about your service learning course.
So the service learning course, essentially what the students do is that it's all active learning based. So the students actively engage in discovering the hazards of Boise. Our main hazards in Boise are severe weather, which we all experienced last winter, earthquakes, flooding, and possibly landslides and wildfires. These are the ones that we worry about the most. And the class I'm teaching, it's not a geoscience class. It's actually taught out of the Honors College, but I hope to open it up to all students in the future. And so the students are not geoscientists. They're all over the board with psychology, sociology, technical communication majors, things like that. So they came in not really knowing a whole lot about hazards. And so the first thing they do is they learn about local hazards by mapping them out, by seeking data and creating maps, hazard maps. And then they also, within their mapping area, map vulnerability. And so vulnerable systems could be things like bridges that could go out if there's flooding, hospitals, retirement homes, elementary schools, places where people would need help if something happened. And then they overlay their hazard map on the vulnerability map, and where a hazard overlaps with the vulnerable system, it's at risk. And so they create a risk map based on their own judgment. And so it helps them personalize the risk of hazards in Boise, who's affected, who's most vulnerable, and thinking about what they can do about it. The service learning aspect is where we do a questionnaire similar to the one I did at UW, where they send it out to their friends and family. We put it out on social media. We got 327 responses for 8 students in the class, which was pretty big, and testing the knowledge, risk perception, preparedness, and attitudes toward preparedness. And based on those findings, the students' service learning project is they have to develop outreach materials that are interactive, because one of our hypotheses is that when you engage your audience somehow, you retain their attention, and it helps them develop a better appreciation for what you're trying to teach them. So it had to be interactive, and it had to help the participants personalize their risk to local natural hazards and develop positive attitudes. So they developed these materials. They were a mixture of storytelling, videos. They were a social media quiz, kind of like, what kind of prince are you going to marry? Except for this one was, how prepared are you? Okay. And a Jeopardy game, and both in English and in Spanish, and there are all kinds of different ways. And they did pre-tests and post-tests when they implemented them to see how successful they were.
Okay. So what do you think about the service learning class? How do you think it helps the community or your students, yourself?
Yeah, so this was my first time teaching a service learning course, and I really enjoyed it. I was nervous teaching it because you don't really know how things are going to go. I mean, there's so many variables. Our partner was Ada County Emergency Management, who worked with the students to make sure that their messages are consistent, their language is appropriate, things like that. And I really wasn't sure how it was going to go, but what ended up happening was that the students, I think that realizing what they were doing was actually making a positive impact in the community, really empowered them to work hard on their projects, and they worked hard on their projects. I'm a little critical, they'll tell you that. And we worked really hard to make sure that everything was visually pleasing, everything was clear, the language was appropriate, and they got really excited about it. And we ended up working as a community versus the professor and the students. I felt like we were actually collaborating together on these projects. And in every single one of them, the post-test showed a change in intention to prepare, which was what we were looking for.
Right. So how has it changed you as a professor, as a person doing this service learning course?
I think for me it was a good experience to learn how to manage so many small projects all at once, all with essentially the same goal, but with different audiences and different objectives and things, but all trying to raise awareness and promote preparedness. So I think for me it was a positive experience because I got to kind of learn how to collaborate on multiple fronts with multiple types of projects together. And it's, I don't know, it's a really fulfilling experience actually, just working with the students on that level, so.
Yeah, you told me you were going on an event. Do you want to, or you went on an event. Do you mind telling me a little bit about that?
Sure. So last week we went to the Oregon Preparedness Workshop, which is the Oregon Emergency Preparedness Workshop. So it's emergency managers and public health professionals from all over Oregon. And they get together once a year and have a workshop where they have breakout sessions and presentations and activities and exercises. And they invited me to come speak about my work, which is focusing on helping people personalize risk, helping people develop positive attitudes toward preparing. And so I kind of slipped in and said, hey, I've got these great students. They're doing these awesome projects. Can they come? And I said, I knew they have some displays. Maybe they could do a display or something. And they said, yeah, that sounds amazing. They can definitely come. In fact, we have an open session. They could give a presentation too.
Wow.
Yeah, so I ended up giving a presentation the first day, and then which kind of led perfectly into their presentation because it was how to engage your audience, how to help them personalize risk, etc. And I said, if you want to find some or see some really innovative, clever ways to do this, some non-traditional ways, go check out my students' talk tomorrow. And so 5 of the students out of the 8 were able to go, and they practiced their presentations many times before they gave them, and it was flawless. It was a packed room. It was the biggest room at the conference center, which they got a bigger room than I did even. And there were at least 65 people. We kind of tried to count about 65 people in the room, and everybody smiled. So it seemed like they did a fantastic job. We got 60 business cards at the end wanting the materials because they're doing this for the community. So they're giving the community their materials. So they want the community to use them, and the community wants them. So.
That's great. Have you heard their feedback about this event or the class? What do students think about this course?
So the students, we did a reflection exercise Tuesday in one of our last classes, and basically the students' response to the course is that this is something that now that they recognize this, the risk and learning how to live with hazards and whatnot, they feel a responsibility to continue sharing their knowledge with their friends, their family, to when they decide to buy a house, they're going to look to see if it's in a hazard zone because they now realize that nobody's going to tell them that. They have to take that responsibility on. And they've essentially become community advocates for natural hazard preparedness, which is amazing. And one of the students is sort of mad at me, but not really mad at me, but she got so into this. She speaks Spanish as well, and she found that a lot of the materials are in English. A lot of the messaging is in English, and she thought that there was really something wrong with that. And after going to the conference and talking to people about it, she's now looking for an internship in Portland where she can, in public health, where she can work with Spanish-speaking populations and help translate some of those materials in Spanish. And so now she's actually looking more into the emergency management public health sector, where she was going to be doing something else after she graduated. So she's not really mad at me, but she's like, I had it all figured out into this class. This is your fault.
That is awesome. What do you hope your students are getting from this experience?
I guess I hope that my students just walk away realizing that they can make a difference, that in their own lives there's a lot of things they can do to prepare, and that there's a lot of ways that they can help the community prepare as well.
Do you have any great plans for the future? You said this was your first year teaching. Would you do it again?
Absolutely. Yeah, this was one of the most fun classes I've taught at Boise State. I mean, I really love teaching volcanology too, but this was a blast. And this is just a very small part of a bigger project, which I'm going to take the same structure, the same thing I do with these students, and try to develop it for K through 12 education, because I think really if we want to create a culture of safety, we need to get this into the schools. We need to start talking about this with the children so they can bring it home to their families and grow up and be more educated, responsible adults. And so this is just the start. It was a pilot. We did pre-tests and post-tests and all that stuff. And we're working to get it down to the K through 12 level. We're working on doing public education modules where we can go out into the public and do this. And also where we take students that are in classes like this and train them so that they can also go out and train the general public on what to expect during natural hazards and how they can prepare and reduce or minimize the impact of hazards for themselves and their families.
Right, okay, so last question. How would you change your, like maybe like how you taught, or like what would you change for next time for service learning?
Good question. You should probably ask my students what I should change for next time. Well, because it was a pilot, I left it pretty flexible. It wasn't a traditional class. We didn't have completely set deadlines all the way along. We just kind of evolved as a class. Mm-hmm. And I think now that I have a lot more figured out, I can set some more rigid deadlines, and I think the students would appreciate that. That was one of their pieces of feedback for me, was mm-hmm. that in a class like this, it's for some of the reports and things, if we can have more distinct deadlines to help them along, because we're all kind of deadline oriented, right? So I'll probably do that, but otherwise I think the way it was taught actually went really, really well, and the students seem to have gotten a lot out of it, and I got a lot out of it, and we all had a lot of fun.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Boise State in the Community. I'm Lupe Fonseca, and I'll see you next time.